Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Juliet, and in today's video I'll be talking about what mental capacity is and mental capacity assessment. So have you ever been in a situation whereby you have been asked to assess the resident's mental capacity and you literally don't know where to start from? If you've been in that situation, this video is going to be of great importance, so kindly watch to the end of it, and I'm hoping that it will be beneficial to you. So in my previous video I talked about what mental capacity is, which is the ability of a resident to understand information, to retain the information, to weigh in the benefits, the risk, and also to communicate their decision with regards to that information provided to them. So it's important to assess residents' mental capacity because when residents come to a nursing home, they have to provide informed consent. And if the resident is unable to understand information provided to them, they cannot provide an informed consent. And any intervention done without informed consent being obtained, it seems like you are assaulting the resident, or you are you're abusing the residents and not allowing them to function within their rights. So therefore we have to do a mental capacity assessment to guide ourselves that we are acting in their best interest. The Mental Capacity Act is intended to ensure that residents who lack capacity, their lives are not unnecessarily controlled and restricted. So this act is to ensure that residents are involved as much as possible in decision-making process. So there are 5 principles with the Mental Capacity Act, which states that the first one states a resident must be assumed to have capacity unless it is established they lack capacity. This simply means that every resident will need to have the mentality that they have capacity to consent to every treatment that is offered to them. Unless we've assessed their capacity, we've provided the information to them, we have observed if they are able to understand that information, if they are able to remember the information needed for them to make a decision, and if they are able to weigh in the benefits, the consequences of the options, and then communicate their decision back to us. So unless we've assessed them in this process and they're unable to do any of this process, we need to assume that every resident has mental capacity and can consent to any care intervention or refuse any care intervention. So we cannot assume that because of the diagnosis of the resident, such as schizophrenia or dementia, they cannot make a decision. The second principle states, a person is not to be treated as unable to make a decision unless all practicable steps to help him to do so have been taken into consideration and without success. So what this simply means is this: we need to ensure that we take every possible practicable step to ensure the residents it's able to understand the information, such as if the resident has a hearing difficulty, they need to have their hearing aids on. If the resident needs to have their glasses on, it should be provided to them. If the resident has difficulties understanding English and probably they understand Italian, it's important to involve an interpreter in that decision-making process. So we need to ensure that everything is done to enable their understanding. We need to provide information in simple terms. We need to ensure the environment is free from noise that could disturb their comprehension of what we are talking about. The third principle states, a person is not to be treated as unable to make a decision merely because it makes an unwise decision. This principle simply means that The fact that a resident's decision is not in line with what the healthcare professional thinks is the right decision to make doesn't mean that they lack the ability to make decisions and they lack mental capacity. This is because every resident's decision making is based on their values and their preferences. So a resident might decline a regular blood test being done because they just don't want it. They might think it's not needed. And if they are able to communicate to you that they know the blood test is to monitor their well-being, but they don't want the blood test done, they're afraid of needles and they just don't want it, then they don't want the blood test done and it shouldn't be done. It doesn't mean they lack capacity to make a decision. The decision is not in line with what they value and what they prefer. The fourth principle states, an act or decision made under this Act for or on behalf of a person who lacks capacity must be done or made in his best interest. So any decision that we take for any resident that lacks capacity, or any action we take on behalf of any resident that lacks capacity, must be done in their best interest. So we need to think that whatever we're doing for them is for their best. So if a resident is unable to provide informed consent with regards to their medication administration, we need to give them their medications that would improve their well-being, because it is to their own advantage. If residents cannot consent to the kind of clothes they want to put on, the care staff need to ensure that they clothe them, bearing in mind and considering the weather. So you can dress the residents on singlets when it's very cold. So you need to do things thinking of how it will benefit them. The fifth and the last principle states, before the act is done or the decision is made, regard must be had to whether the purpose for which it is intended or needed can be as effectively achieved in a way that is less restrictive of the person's rights and freedom of action. So any decision we make, any actions we take on behalf of residents must be the less restrictive ones, because we want to still uphold their freedom, maintain their rights, and we do not want to restrict them unnecessarily and control them unnecessarily. That is why it's not right when residents who wander around for their bed rails to be placed up when they have not been assessed to need the bed rails up, and when staff put up the bed rails just because we do not want them wandering about. It's very restrictive, because there is a better way to communicate with the residents not to wander around than to put up the bed rails to restrict their movement. So in every decision we make, we need to look out for the less restrictive ways to support the residents. When assessing a resident's mental capacity, it's important to consider the time. So it's best to assess residents' mental capacity during the time when they are more alert, such as in the morning or in the afternoon. And also consider assessing the mental capacity of a resident when they're not under the effects or experiencing side effects of medications that causes drowsiness. It's also important to provide information to residents in a way that they are more likely to understand it. Some residents understand pictures better, some would understand rating things better, some would understand information in a very simple way. So we need to communicate in that manner with them. Some residents will also benefit from people who they are familiar with being present, and also people who they're familiar with being present knows how best to communicate with the residents. So always bear these tips in mind, and I'm hoping that you understand how to perform and assess a resident's mental capacity. Just look out for the ability of the residents to understand their information. Are they able to remember the information? As long as that decision making process, not longer than that, is not necessary. Are they able to weigh in the benefits and the consequence, and are they able to communicate it back to you? So if they are unable to do any of this, it means they don't have mental capacity, and then we have to act in their best interest and ensure that the least restrictive options, it's what we choose. Thank you so much, and if this video has been of any benefit to you, kindly like, subscribe, and share my video. Thank you.